Hey there, friends. It's me, Eli, and it is Tuesday, March 17th, Gregorian year 2020. And I'm here in Brooklyn, New York, making another episode of my Speculative Solidarity series for you guys out there in sparkling isolation land. As of today, Tuesday, I've been mostly self-isolating in my house since last Wednesday evening. Wednesday morning last week, I had my last class at Pratt where I teach. As of last night, San Francisco declared, I think, the most severe controls, restrictions that I've seen of a major city in the United States. With sheltering in place, with literally no one leaving for anything other than essentials. Things are proceeding from day to day with a lot of confusion and a lot of fear swirling around. Today's topic is called The Work of Worlding, Rewriting Roles and Reclaiming Self. And some of the ways in which I feel like we can combat and use this time most effectively to create change in our experience while we are in this uncertain time, as well as to create potential transformation for what follows, is by doing this work that we've been doing in the last couple of episodes, right? Like with thinking about the way we use language and transforming some of the way that we perceive and experience our time right now, as well as in general, and sort of utilizing the tools that we have at hand to maybe really make some substantial changes while we're in this kind of liminal space that's so different from our everyday experience. So I made myself some little notes, and I also have a couple of things that I'm using, so I'm all over the place today. So be patient with me. So the first thing that I wanted to do was say that the last couple of episodes, if you haven't seen them yet, you can go back and check them out. The first one is about like breaking up with capitalism, and the second one is called Close Everything. Both of them continue a theme of thinking about the ways in which capitalism as a logic and as something that becomes embodied creates a certain sense of understandings of the world and ways of operating within it that are in fact circumstantial and not fixed. And also how language can be used to start to break down that relationship and really create a more intentional and also empowered way of being, both within institutions and to which extent we have to relate with them, as well as with ourselves. So I think that right now it's a really interesting time to think about languaging, because we have language that is coming to us every day, right? We have such a thing, like I just said about San Francisco, the term shelter in place, right? The term social distancing, the term flatten the curve. These are all things we're hearing almost every day right now, and they've become part of our parlance unwittingly, right? We haven't chosen them. Here they are, and they're taking up a lot of room in our brain, right? Similar to the ways that other words that we've gotten used to take up room in our brain. And so I'm here, to think today specifically about the roles that we play and the way that we language what roles we have and who we are in relationship to institutions and in relationship maybe to also being in the world, right? And I just wanted to give a little framework. So like I have been working for a pretty long time on a number of different things that are related to this. One of them is called disruptor mechanisms around something that I call reorientation. So here is a little zine from a installation that I did of this. And so there's this field protocol for these disruptor mechanisms, right? So what we're doing today is kind of like a linguistic disruptor mechanism. These disruptor mechanisms have to do with the idea that you would take some sort of tool and start to disrupt your ways of being in order to rebuild, right? So I've actually been working with that for a long time. It's part of also a series that I'm doing called like How to Human, right? And I like to think about what we can potentially do as being humaning as opposed to institutioning, right? Like how to human versus how to institution is a really interesting question. And so this also comes from and in tandem with this work around sort of body hacking, right? And so I actually have this book. It's called Collaborative Precarity Body Hacking, the Workbook and Resource Guide. And I made this particular version of this work together with Corey Tamler and Storm Budwig, a performance artist and dancer choreographer, respectively. And during this video and afterwards, wherever I post this, I'm going to upload a live PDF for an open source PDF for you to use. There's lots of prompts in there that you can do and work that you can do to think about the ways in which institutions and precarity in particular have affected your body and created trauma that affects your brain. And so I was thinking today about the ways in which, for me personally, I have come to consider my work in the world to be a kind of work of worlding, or of learning how to be a human, of helping other people think about what it means to be a human, of being in co-evolutionary relationship with non-human allies, of teaching and of healing and of connection and of elucidation, right? So if I think of my roles, I think of those actions that I feel like are my actions in the world. And so I think that it's a really important thing for me to differentiate between a job that I might have and my role. These are not the same thing. And to whatever extent we are more precarious than others, we don't always get to choose the jobs or the titles that we have or how well they fit our roles. But even when I worked in the service industry, which I did for a really long time, I tried to figure out how I could turn my job into something that fulfilled my role. And so that's an interesting question that I have for everybody today. The question and the prompt, and I'll actually give you a prompt that you can do. I'll do it a little later, and it will also be in the text accompanying this, around how you can frame yourself and how you can create and think about this other language. I wanted to, before we get into that, I wanted to share with you from Bronnie Ware, who is a palliative care hospice nurse in Australia, who gathered the top 5 regrets of the dying. And I don't mean for this to be dark, because I don't think it's dark, but I do think it's important for us to think about right now. As we think, people wished that they had had the courage to live a life true to themselves, not what others expected of them. The second was that people wished they had not worked so hard for other people. The third was that they wish they'd had the courage to express their feelings. The fourth, wishing they'd stayed in touch with their friends. And the fifth, wishing that they'd let themselves be happy. Right, so I bring these things up because I think that right now we're in this liminal space, right? This in-between space where we are more in touch with our friends, hopefully, if that's something that's available to you, where we are maybe not working or not working in the same way, or our bodies are kind of asking us to not be working insofar as we are not necessarily doing the labor that we would do for someone else, or we're not behaving in the way that we have been expected to behave in order to move capitalism forward, right? Which is what my 2 first videos are about in a lot of ways. So as you come away from that, and also as you stare mortality in the face, yours and other people's mortality, it's really natural right now to be saying to yourself, like, what is it that I do in the world? And I think that a lot of what we're seeing right now is we're seeing people here in New York, the restaurants and bars have closed. But before that, there was a lot of outcry around how people were continuing to go out. And tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about compassion. But, I think that a lot of people's reason for going out was not like necessarily even what they said it was. It wasn't not being scared. It was actually exactly being scared. These are people's coping mechanisms. And these coping mechanisms have been developed because we are in a culture where we have been encouraged to identify with the things that we buy, the places we go, with what other people mirror back to us. Many of us have not really taken the time to create an identity for ourselves, to write these roles for ourselves outside of the value systems that are given to us by our culture. Many of us are not ready to be alone for an extended period of time because we are alone with our thoughts in a way that is very uncomfortable for most people. And that's an incredibly immediate reaction, whereas the threats can feel much more abstract. So I think people running from that immediacy of the danger is actually something that we need to look at critically. So here's our prompt for you today. How can you frame yourself? What roles might you cast yourself in? And if everything falls away, intellectually, actually, as well as if you remove for a minute the ideas about feasibility, responsibility, right? Precarity, institutional or disciplinary language. What are your roles, right? You heard some of the ones that I would use for myself, right? Connector, healer, teacher, conduit, intermediary, alchemist, clarifier, right? I have this thing that I used to do where I would, on medical forms, I would occasionally just write magician or alchemist or something in the job line and see if anyone asked me about it. I find that sort of jamming the record in formal spaces can be a thing that can be very empowering. So that's something that I try to do as well. And even if you do that just on your own, how does that feel, right? If you blank things out or work with formal mediums, like to make it in sort of like a creative or artistic way. So what starts to happen when you begin to reframe? How can this time shift around that for you? If you relanguage both yourself and we also start to relanguage the situation that we're in as something that is extremely frightening, but maybe is one of the only ways that we would have actually gotten shaken up enough to make the changes that need to happen without the sort of daily insistence of the speed of capital, the daily insistence upon hustle, the daily kind of requirement simply just to get through a day in the system that the way that it works, right? Like what was going to slow that system down enough? What was going to be the thing that made enough people able to step back and have this kind of time of consideration? This is an incredible gift in that way. So we're left thinking who we could be together, who we could be as kin, who we can be in network, what the world can be, right? And so I invite you, take a little time to write or think about this, make a video, put it in the comments, send me a DM, slide into my DMs, but not with something creepy, just with like what you want to be in the world, okay? Tomorrow, or when I get to it, a lot of, cultivating compassion. Invite versus attack. We invite, we attack, we stay home and have a snack. Sparkling solidarity. I love you guys a lot. Take good care of yourselves.